Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Another episode of watching Jorge Bergoglio, the bishop dressed in white, the Bishop of Rome, not necessarily the Vicar of Christ, but that's a different story, destroy everything in his way, destroy the heritage of the church, destroy the liturgy of the church. Well, at least attempt to do so. You probably heard that Jorge Francis attempted to impose new restrictions on the real Roman Rite, the traditional Roman Rite, in favor of the fake fabricated liturgy of Paul VI. Now, we'll start off we're going to deal into it, we're going to deal with it, and we'll see if he even has the right to do so, if even Paul VI had even the right to invent his fabricated liturgy in the first place. I will start off with Francis of Assisi's prophecy, which seems from Francis of Assisi, and we have a pope called Francis. It seems kind of apropos, as they say. So this is taken from the works of the Seraphic Father, St. Francis of Assisi, published in 1882. So it wasn't published by some traditionalists on the internet in the year 2000 or 2013, when Jorge, dressed up in white. So here it is. So it says, there's going to be a bad time. Malice and wickedness will increase. I mean, can be more wickedness exist than it is today, especially regarding morality and sexual ethics and even identity of people, perverting the minds of children, trying to destroy their innocence and destroy the minds of everybody, basically. So it says, the devils will have unusual power during this time. And very few Christians will obey the true sovereign pontiff. And I have this previous video to this is Father Z. Zulsdorf commenting on the situation of the two popes in the Vatican with Francis and Pope Benedict. Anyways, you can watch the video for more details on this situation. And the Roman Church says, at the time of this tribulation, a man not canonically elected will be raised to the pontificate. So it will still be called pontiff in my pontificate, like Jorge will say, it's the ninth year of my pontificate or seventh year of my pontificate. Yeah, but was he canonically elected? Well, if Benedict's partial renunciation of the office, renouncing the active exercise but not the actual office, is invalid, which it probably is in my humble opinion, and then we have a non-canonically elected man to the pontificate. He will still be called pontiff, but maybe he is aware of that fact, since Jorge himself removed from the pontifical yearbook. I have a whole video on it. It's called Call Me Jorge, Not the Vicar of Christ. He removed the title of Vicar of Christ, successor of the Prince of the Apostles, and Supreme Pastor of the Universal Church. He removed them from his titles. He just kept Bishop of Rome, a Pontiff of Rome, a Bishop of Rome. That's good. No, he's admitting it. And actually, if you notice in all his writings, he will just sign Francis or Franciscus. No PP, no Pope, no nothing. Benedict, up to this day, when he signs his name, Benedict, he will say PP. PP is it is basically Papa Pontifex, father, like Pope and Pontiff. But Francis never puts the PP, Pope and Pontiff. He might be just Pontiff, a bishop, basically. All right, we'll see. So a man non-canonically elected will be raised to the pontificate, who by his cunning will endeavor to draw many into error and death. Just think of Amoris Laetitia, for example. Well, it says actually, it might be a virtue to disobey God's law. It might be a sin to obey God's law, because it would have been a virtue not to do so. I can't remember the exact meaning, but that's basically, and it even spouts heresy that sometimes people are unable to follow the laws of God, which is a condemned heresy by the church. But There you go. That's amoris. And you can go to confession and receive and come to the Eucharist, even if though you are in an objective state of mortal sin, and you have no intention to alter it, but that's okay. Come and eat and drink judgment on yourself, as St. Paul says. Um, so it says here, those who persevere in their fervor and adhere to the virtue with love and zeal for the truth, that would be called rigidity by Jorge. They're rigid, will suffer injuries and persecutions as rebels and schismatics. But who is the real schismatic? Those who adhere to the truth, once for all delivered to the saints, as St. Paul says, or those who follow every wind of doctrine, warned against by St. Paul. You can read the whole thing. But anyways, at the end of it, it says, at that time, Jesus Christ will send us, will send them, not a true pastor, but a destroyer. And Jorge, since day one, has been a destroyer. He destroyed the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate, one of the most uh, um, alive and expanding congregations. He's attempting or almost destroyed the Franciscan Sisters of the Immaculate. He destroyed various traditional monasteries, like the one in Germany, who tried to restore the Ancient Rite. He removed very traditional bishops and installed, modernist heretics in their place. And now they're going to, in his new Motu Proprio of the Pontiff, not the PP, not the Pope and Pontiff, but they just simply Pontiff. He is going to move all the traditional orders in under the Congregation for the consecrated life, which will mean they will have visitations pretty soon, and basically they will be attempted to be destroyed by the destroyer. So anyways, let's continue. So if you don't know, anyways, we're going to get to Jorge's his Motu Proprio, but I won't dwell on it. I'm just going to say, well, he attempted to put all these restrictions. Basically, all these restrictions have to be ignored from top to bottom. Every priest, every bishop, every cardinal should just simply ignore them. They just ignore them. Just follow the tradition of the church and celebrate the ancient liturgy, whether the Pope likes it or not, whether your bishop likes it or not. And we're actually just, I'm going to maybe tell you for now that Benedict himself said that the missal, the Roman missal of 1962, has never been abrogated. So it is the legal missal of the Roman Church. You cannot not abrogate, like you cannot ban it or it has never been abrogated. So it is still legally the missal of the Roman Church. And Francis, in his so-called Motu Proprio, doesn't even attempt to do so. So he cannot stop a Roman Rite priest from celebrating the Roman liturgy from the Roman books, which have never, ever been abrogated, which cannot be abrogated anyways, but let's continue. So we'll start with the 19th, because we're getting into a state now where there is no compromise between the real Roman Rite and the fake Roman Rite, between the true Catholic doctrine and the modernist heresies and of those in power. Like there's either you keep the true faith Catholic, unholy Catholic and Apostolic, which is even expressed in the new Catechism of the Catholic Church of John Paul II, and even in the Compendium before Francis inserted his anti-Catholic quib about the death penalty in it, but that could be ignored. Just get a little pen and delete it. Even the Compendium is solidly Catholic. So yeah, we keep the faith as declared by the Church for 2,000 years and not the innovations of the destroyers. So here's the declaration of 1974, Declaration of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. And he did this declaration because people sent from the Vatican were kind of attempting to destroy the faith of his seminarians, even about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm just going to read it quickly because this is basically what we have to do. we hold fast and with all our hearts and with all our soul to Catholic Rome, guardian of the Catholic faith and of all the traditions necessary to preserve this faith, to eternal Rome, mistress and of wisdom and of truth. We refuse, on the other hand, and we have always refused to follow the Rome of neo-modernist and neo-Protestant tendencies, and we clearly which were clearly evident at the Second Vatican Council and after the councils in all the reforms, the deforms, which issued from it. Even though, for example, Vatican II in his Sacrosanctum Concilium specifically talks about the Latin rites. So it's not just the one rite. The Latin rites would be the Dominican, the Carthusian, the rite of Braga, the Masoretic, the whole, all, and that these rites are to be preserved and fostered in every way. It talks same about the Eastern rites. It's not talking about their destruction and replacement with novelties, which Paul VI admits he has done, and we are going to see what Paul VI did. All right. All these reforms indeed have contributed and are still contributing to the destruction of the church. And now it is even, well, worse than ever, like look, Francis attempting to suppress, or basically, he calls his declaration guardians of tradition. Basically, not as the bishops are guardians. The bishops, like he's saying, the bishops, okay, are gonna close the gates. They're gonna guard tradition. They're gonna lock it into place, prevent it from expanding and growing. That is the only reason for this motu proprio is the growth of the traditional Catholic movement, the growth of true Catholicism, the growth of the tradition, of the liturgical rites of the ancient church. With them is the doctrine of the ancient church. That's why Francis wants to clamp down on it. But he's okay with bringing a pagan fertility goddess Pachamama on the altar in St. Peter's Basilica. That's fine. He can watch pagans and Franciscans bow down to a demon goddess in the Vatican gardens. That's great. He was willing to incorporate pagan rites into the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI for Amazon or Africa or whatever, because it's great, it's fantastic. But what is not allowed is adhering to pure Catholic doctrine, to pure Catholic rites, to pure ancient Christian heritage of apostolic origin. That's not allowed. But every mode of innovation, novelty, experimentation is all fantastic. What is not allowed is rigidity and adherence to apostolic rites. All right, so we're going to skip some. No authority, not even the highest in the hierarchy, which would be the Pope, can force us to abandon or diminish our Catholic faith. So he says about the novelties. These novelties are basically destroying the church. It is impossible to modify profoundly the lex orandi, which is the law of prayer, which is the liturgy, the mass, the liturgy for the mass, the liturgy for the sacraments, without modifying the lex credendi, which is the law of belief, the faith. That is why you have the mass exodus from the Catholic faith, the mass material heresy of most Catholics who no longer believe the explicit Catholic faith because this is what they got fed in the new liturgy. They are not getting fed the purity of Catholic doctrine, so their faith is deformed. This Reformation, I will call it a deformation, born of liberalism and modernism, is poisoned through, and it derives from heresy and ends in heresy, even if all its acts are not formally heretical. But it will eventually lead to heresy, and that's why you see the mass defection from the Catholic faith and the mass influx into heretical sects or atheism or Gnosticism, not Gnosticism, but agnosticism. The only attitude of faithfulness to the Church and to Catholic doctrine in view of our salvation is a categorical refusal to accept this reformation, this deformation. So we adhere to the ancient liturgy. We adhere to the ancient faith. We adhere to the ancient discipline. And that's the teaching of the Catholic Church, as we shall see if you stay with me. This is why we hold fast to all that has been believed and practiced in the faith, morals, liturgy, teaching, catechism, and so forth. And he says we have to do this so we become faithful, fidelis dispensatores mysterium Domini nostri Jesu Christi in Spiritu Sancto, that we be faithful dispensers of the mysteries of our Lord Jesus Christ in the Holy Spirit. Amen. And he gets this quote from St. Paul, so 1 Corinthians 4:11, when he talks about him and the men he will be installing as bishops as dispensers of the mysteries of God. 1 Corinthians 4:1. It's from St. Paul. So this is our attitude is, we will hold on to the faith once for all delivered to the saints. We will adhere to apostolic liturgy and praxis. And we don't care if Jorge says for us to do otherwise, we won't. Because he has no authority over this matter. And actually, we will see that a pope can become a schismatic if he attempts to replace the ancient liturgy with a fabricated one, which Paul VI of unhappy memory did, and what Jorge is attempting to reimpose. All right, so this is Jorge Francisco. See, he never puts the PP, which is Papa and Pontiff, Pope and Pontiff, after his name, because he doesn't believe himself to be the vicar of Christ. He's just a bishop dressed in white. He himself referred to himself like that. I am the bishop dressed in white when he visited Fatima. And this bishop dressed in white, the children at Fatima, in their vision released by the Vatican, themselves were not sure it was the Pope. They say he seems to be the Pope, because it was like in a mirror, like in a reverse image, like an anti-Pope, for example. So a lot of other videos, Dr. Taylor Marshall and others have the whole thing, and you can read it yourself. But just a couple of notes. The liturgical books promulgated by Paul VI and Saint, John Paul II, in conformity with the decrees of Vatican II. They're not, because the decrees of Vatican II tell you to preserve the ancient rites, to foster them and protect them, and Gregorian chant to be pride of place, and Latin is to be preserved, and the Latin rites, not just the Latin Roman Rite, and Latin rites, and that the faith will be learned how to say it in Latin. So all of that has been thrown in the garbage against the decrees of Vatican II. So it is like, it does have, like Michael Davies said, Vatican II had time bombs, things which were vague. Like I have my review on here. You should watch, again, the Annibale Bonini, Destroyer of the Roman Rite. I have a video on that. And they put these vaguenesses on purpose so they can actually, after the council, put whatever meaning they want into the deform. And he says, in conformity are the unique expression, like the only expression of the lex orandi, the law of prayer of the Roman Rite. Well, actually, even Paul VI himself doesn't call his missal the Roman Rite or the Roman Missal, but he calls it actually the new Rite. And we will see. I did a whole video ranting and raving about the two speeches of Paul VI, which he himself calls his liturgy a fabricated, he calls it a novelty, an innovation, unprecedented, an annoyance. He calls it all that. A new rite, and he compares it to the Roman Rite, to the Roman Missal. His Missal to the Roman Missal, which means they are two different things. We're going to get to that in a second. And then actually here in Rorati, Chile, they have an article by a canon lawyer, canonist, a father, a priest, and he says, because this is a restrictive measure, so it has to be strictly interpreted according to Canon 15. And actually, uh, um, so anyways, you should read his little thing. Um, and anyways, he said, look, the traditional missal remains as it always was, never abrogated, and we have that from Pope Benedict XVI, never abrogated, never abrogated, and as thus always legal, always able to be used, as Benedict himself, 16th, himself has said. It's never abrogated, so I can use it. I'm a Roman Rite priest. I can use the Roman Rite. Never abrogated. You can't stop me from using it. The rite established by quo primum, which is the liturgical, which is the papal bull of Pius V, giving after he edited the Roman Missal already in use in the city of Rome, in the Roman Curia, which has been spread throughout the world as the Roman Rite, by the theological and so it is, first of all, the traditional Missal remains as it always has been, never abrogated. The rites established, which Francis doesn't even attempt to do. The rites established by quo primum, by the theological and liturgical tradition of the Western rites, and immemorial custom remain intact. So here you go, Jorge. So we need courageous priests who are going to say, well, whatever. You can say whatever you want to say. The missal has never been abrogated. It is of immemorial right, immemorial custom, which you cannot remove. And quo primum actually guarantees use of this missal. So even though it was edited, extra feasts were added, and so forth, even up to John the 23rd, the bull quo primum was always at the head of this missal. Paul VI did not put quo primum in his rite. So the last Roman missal is that of John the 23rd with the bull quo primum. As such, it retains its authority. So he talks about the unique Roman Rite. Oh yeah, here's the stupidity of the incompetence of the Francis Curia. In Article 3 here it says, the bishop of the diocese in which until now there exists one or more groups that celebrate according to the missal antecedent, which is before the reform of 1970. Blah, 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 blah. So what is this missal of? So, well, actually, the missal before 1970 was the one of 1965, and then a slight alterations in 1967, which nobody uses. Nobody uses. It's not the missal of John the 23rd or 1962. Then he quotes a bit of Vatican II, which is in faithful obedience to tradition, the Sacred Council. So it would be in disobedience to tradition if you do the opposite. So in obedience to the Sacred Council declares that the Holy Mother Church holds all lawfully acknowledged rights, so not the fabrications of Paul VI, but the existing rights, to be of equal rights and dignity, that she wishes to preserve them, not destroy them, in the future, and to foster them in every way. That's Vatican II for you. So basically, he says, look, you can restrict all you want the 1965 edition, which was the missal before 1970. There you go. And then again, he talks about like the first article. It says, a priest should submit a request. Well, don't. Don't should or would or ought to. Like, yeah, whatever, man. Whatever, man. So, now let's go to the. All right, so. Ecumenical councils. Oh, we're going to get to it in a second. All right, so maybe I mentioned this book in other videos. I think it is completely out of print. The Liturgy and Papal Documents. So it has documents from the popes up to and including John the 23rd. And basically you read this and you will see that the popes had extreme care in preserving the liturgical rites, in keeping them intact, in no innovation. Any so-called, even in the name of restoring things, even for Eastern rites, you can't restore it. You have to keep it, hold it. You have to examine and make sure, and then maybe, with approval of the Holy See, you can restore something, but certainly not destroy the whole rite and invent a new one. That was unthinkable. Uh, like in liturgical innovations, and I'm just going to quote a few things. It's from 1832. No innovation whatsoever is to be made in the rite of the Holy Liturgy, even on the grounds of returning to ceremonies thought to be more in continuity with the liturgy approved by the same Holy See. So it's not up to you. It's not like even up to the Holy See. It's like you have, the whole point is to preserve. Um, and then this is from 1928, Rules for Sacred Music. Then there's a close connection between dogma and the sacred liturgy, between dogma and the sacred liturgy. Therefore, if you alter the sacred liturgy, you alter dogma. All right? You alter dogma. And between Christian worship and the sanctification of the faithful. Again, if you alter the way worship is done, you alter the level of sanctification of the faithful. And then it goes to Pope Celestine I, saw the standard of faith expressed in the sacred formulae of the liturgy. The rule of our faith, he says, is indicated by the law of our worship. Here. So I'm not going to go see which pope said that and what. But anyways, I'm just telling you, if you get this book, you will see actually how careful the Roman Church, even more than the Eastern churches, attempted to avoid all innovations. The big break happened under Pius XII, where Bonini, the destroyer of the Roman Rite, snuck in under an experimental basis the deform of Holy Week liturgies, the Holy Week simplification. And that opened the floodgates. And apparently Pius X attempted to change something in the breviary and how it's done. Again, that'll be, instead of preserving and maintaining, it was using pontifical power, not rightly used, an abuse of power to alter the liturgy. But again, Pius XII opened the gate with especially with the Holy Week liturgies, and of course, that went into the total destruction of the Roman Rite with Paul VI. The only competent authority. This is from which year is this? Which pope is that? Whatever, it doesn't matter. The only competent authority here. I'm just reading down here. Oops. Oh man, I don't know which bookmark I had it here for, but anyways. So the Church has further used the rites to control over liturgical observance. Why? To protect the purity of divine worship against abuse from dangerous and imprudent innovations. So it talks about what happened in the 16th century. So private initiative in matters of liturgical threatened in the 16th century. So private initiatives in matters liturgical threatened to compromise the integrity and devotion, to the great advantage of heretics. So Pope Sixtus V, of immortal memory, established the sacred congregation of rites, charged it with what is the function of the congregation of rites, or the congregation for the divine worship and the sacraments, is the defense of the legitimate rites of the church, the legitimate which exist in the church, the rites of the church, and the prohibition of any spurious innovation. That is their function. And I can't remember where I had a little bookmark for it, so that's good enough. But anyways, the point is, the church has always held very, 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 very importantly the church against innovations because you adhere to the ancient liturgy. I have a little video of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre talking in his homily in Lille in 1976, which is mirroring our situation. Let's actually quickly look at. We're going to get to. Well, yeah, I'll just few. Well, I'm going to show you basically what one of my videos here, the Novus Ordo Mass, neither Catholic nor Apostolic. Again, I was kind of ranting and raving here, which is true. It is rightful anger. But here is what is basically what Cardinal Ratzinger said about this ordinary form. He called this is a fabrication, a banal, and he wrote this in the French introduction to the Reform of the Roman Liturgy by Monsignor Klaus Gamber, which Ratzinger called the greatest liturgist of the 20th century. So it's called a fabrication. So that's the ordinary form. That's the rite of Paul VI, the fake Roman rite of Jorge. So this is a fabrication, a banal, on-the-spot product, a reform which is in reality a continued revolution. Our church is emptied in spite of the new liturgy. It's actually because of the new liturgy. Not in spite of it. It's because of the new liturgies our church is emptied. And the faithful continued to fall away from the church in droves. By their fruits you shall know them. By its fruits you shall know it. The new liturgical forms did not provide the people with bread, but with stones. That's what Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, said. The new liturgical forms did not provide the people with bread, but with stones. And then another video I did again about this. I told you already this book review of the book, Destruction of the Roman Rite, and by Annibale Bonini and Paul VI, of course. So Cardinal Ratzinger and Benedict XVI, again, he himself said again in that book here, what happened after the counts was altogether different. Instead of a liturgy, fruit of continuous development, a fabricated liturgy was put in its place. And this is not an attack on Paul VI, because Paul VI himself will say the exact same thing, as you're going to see. A living, growing process was abandoned, and the fabrication started. There was no further wish to continue the organic evolution and maturation of the living being throughout the centuries, and they were replaced as if in a technical production by a fabrication, a banal product of the moment. That is Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict XVI. That is your ordinary form. That's the fake Roman rite. All right, before we go, do you want to put a bit of Archbishop Lefebvre here, because it's very, very telling. I'm going to put my little headphones here so I can actually hear what he's saying, so I can stop it at the appropriate time, because I just have a few little clips. All right, and there was this demonstration, people went to greet the bishop and attend Mass in the real Roman Rite in 1976 in defiance of Paul VI, who attempted to impose his fake rite, his new rite, as he himself calls it. Let's hear Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre.
Un défi? Eh bien non, cette manifestation n'est pas un défi. Cette manifestation, c'est vous qui l'avez désirée, chers fidèles, chers frères, qui êtes venus ici de loin. Pourquoi? Pour manifester votre foi catholique, pour manifester votre croyance, pour manifester votre désir de prier et de vous sanctifier comme l'ont fait vos pères dans la foi, comme l'ont fait des générations avant vous. Voilà quel est l'objet véritable de cette cérémonie.
So, yeah, they were there simply to pray as their fathers did, to adhere to the faith of their fathers, to celebrate imagine Jorge attempting to destroy the rites of the East. What would he say to the Orthodox? No wonder the Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox are watching what's happening in the Roman Church and laughing, or maybe crying, saying, "Oh my God, they have gone off the deep end." And this actually, what's happening, reinforces the so-called Orthodox in their belief against the papacy. They don't want a man who has the power to destroy the apostolic liturgies in his own name and by his own power, which of course he doesn't, because the church even doesn't allow it. But this is an abuse of power, and he thinks he has that power. So, for the Eastern Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox, do you think they would even want to attempt to union with and communion with the successor of Peter, assuming, of course, Francis is a successor of Peter, not Benedict? No, no, they wouldn't. They would say, let's stay far away from this insanity. All right, another clip here.
Pourquoi? Parce que je suis moi aussi un simple catholique, certes prêtre, certes évêque, mais qui suis dans les mêmes conditions dans lesquelles vous vous trouvez, et qui ai les mêmes réactions devant la destruction de l'Église, devant la destruction de notre foi, devant les ruines qui s'accumulent devant nos yeux. Ayant eu la même réaction, j'ai pensé qu'il était de...
Yeah, so he's there because he sees the destruction which is before our eyes. And it is far worse now than it was in his day, unfortunately, sadly. But those who seek to destroy the faith, well, they are agents of the devil, basically, agents of hell. And they continue. Let's do one last clip, and then we'll actually maybe two more little clips. But
que si à ce moment-là, j'avais formé mes séminaristes comme on les forme.
So he says, look, if I'm going to form seminaries like they do today, or celebrate Mass like they do today, let's listen to it.
Maintenant, dans les nouveaux séminaires, j'aurais été excommunié. Si j'avais à ce moment-là enseigné le catéchisme qu'on enseigne dans les écoles à ce moment-là, on m'aurait dit hérétique. Et si j'avais dit la Sainte Messe, comme on l'a dit maintenant, on m'aurait dit suspect d'hérésie. On m'aurait dit aussi hors de l'Église. Alors je ne comprends plus. Quelque chose précisément a changé dans l'Église. Et c'est à cela que je veux en venir.
I hope you can read the subtitles basically on this, because he says, look, if I'm celebrating Mass the way they do now, I'd be suspected of heresy. If I teach the seminarians the way they are taught now, I'd be like, kicked out of the church. If I teach the catechism like it's being taught, I'd be, excommunicated, because it's all teaching error. So, but I hope you actually can read the subtitles for this. If you understand French, that's great. It's not very hard French if you know the basic French anyways. I forgot that I should maybe talk about it. But I mean, you can find the full videos online, and you can watch the whole video. One last clip here before we continue with the rest.
So
he says basically, look, they don't want to make martyrs, because the martyrs are the seed of the church, the blood of the martyrs. So they want to basically destroy us, destroy our faith through obedience. Obey. They don't want to make us martyrs. They want us obeying by obeying and defying Christ. False obedience.
Christianorum, le sang des martyrs est une semence de chrétiens. Et ils le savent bien, ceux qui persécutent les chrétiens. Ils ont peur d'en faire des martyrs, parce qu'ils savent que le sang des martyrs est une semence de chrétiens. Mais on ne veut plus faire de martyrs. Ça a été le summum de la victoire du démon, de détruire l'Église par obéissance.
The victory of the devil is to destroy the church through obedience.
Détruire l'Église par obéissance. Nous la voyons détruite tous les jours sous nos yeux.
Anyways, he says, like, where are the seminarians? They all disappeared. Empty seminary. What happened to the seminarian leader? Where did all the seminarians go? And so forth. So that's a few clips, and then maybe we'll finish the video with a couple more clips from him from the great Holy Archbishop. But let's continue here. Now, let me take these things off. Now, so I'm not saying things which are not true, because I don't. Let's see what Paul VI, the destroyer of the Roman Rite, of unhappy memory, who probably got himself excommunicated from the church, became a schismatic against the body of Christ. But who knows? Maybe he died repentant. Apparently, he was in this distraught state for the last few years of his life. Maybe he woke up. Who knows? But anyways, here's what Paul VI, in his general audience, Wednesday, November 19th, 1969, so just before the issuance of his Missale Romanum. Actually, I want to say something about his that the missal has never been abrogated. I hope I have to remember to do that. But we're going to go through what's Paul VI thing and said, and then about the first of all, Benedict XVI himself said it's never been abrogated. It has never been abrogated. His Constitution Missale Romanum, he says, oh, these are decrees, blah blah blah, have nothing to do about abrogating the previous missal. So bam. So anyways, general audience of November 19th, 1969. So he says, look, I'm just going to not read the whole thing. I'm just going to quote a few words. The new liturgical order. So he's happy to welcome with joy and apply the new Ordo, the new liturgical order. And then he calls it the introduction into the liturgy. Liturgy being all the different worship of all the liturgies, as the ceremonies and rites and prayers of all the sacraments. So this is the whole liturgy of the church, including the divine office. Introduction into the liturgy of the new rite. The new rite of the Mass. The new rite. So it is not the Roman rite. It is not any of the ancient Latin rites. It is the new rite. It is the rite of Paul VI. That is why the Knights of Malta, after they've been purged by Francis the Humble, they abandoned the ancient Roman rite and adhere to the new rite, which the Knights of Malta themselves in 2019 say the rite of Paul VI. The rite of Paul VI. Accurate. The rite of Paul VI. It's not the Roman rite. Here, Paul VI himself calls it the new rite of the Mass. And not just of the Mass, of all, because this was step one. And then all 7 sacraments had a new rite of confirmation, the new rite of baptism, the new rite of penance, the new rite of marriage, the new rite of ordination. The new rite, not the Roman rite, the rite of Paul VI. And he says, look, this is something surprising, extraordinary, not normal, being considered. The Mass, first of all, the Mass was a traditional and intangible expression of our religious worship. It says it somewhere that is untouchable, of the authenticity of our faith. So this is the real Mass, the Roman Mass, or ancient liturgies. But now it's this authenticity of our faith, this traditional, intangible expression of our religious worship will be replaced by a new rite. And he calls it, this is a singular novelty. And the church throughout its history always condemned novelty. And St. Vincent of Lerins, he warns against novelty. Novelty is always condemned throughout the church's history. Why such change? So he gives, of course, his lying spiel. Obviously, it's a change. It's a new rite. It's a novelty. Here you go. It's written by Paul VI himself. And then he says another question. What does this change consist of? Many new ritual prescriptions. New ritual prescriptions because it's the new rite. It is a fabricated liturgy, as Paul Ratzinger says. The Mass, and of course all the other sacraments as well later on, of the new order, because of the new rite of the new order. As if in the new rite, blah, 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 blah. The third question, what were the consequences of the consequences? What consequences will the innovation we are discussing produce the innovation. So it's a novelty, innovation, new rite, new order. Okay, get it through your heads. It's not the Roman Rite. The innovation. We will not therefore say new mass because it's the new rite of mass. It's not the new mass. It's the new rite of mass, not, but rather a new epoch. A new epoch in the life of the church. Of course, there was a new epoch. It is the beginning of the destruction of the church on a global scale. That is what Paul VI says. It's not the Roman Rite. He himself tells you. It's not the like Benedict XVI attempted to be nice, even though he expressed the truth previously, as you have seen. It's pretending it's like one rite, and these are the two forms of the one rite. No, Paul VI, the inventor of the new rite, himself calls it the new rite, a novelty, an innovation, unprecedented. What more do you want? So here, one more time, Paul VI, general audience. A few days later, November 26, 1969, again, he calls it the new rite of the Holy Mass and of all the other sacraments later on. Okay? And he calls it the liturgical novelty. We turn to the liturgical novelty of the new rite, the liturgical novelty of the new rite of the Mass and of the other sacraments later on. New rite of the Mass, new rite of baptism, new rite of confirmation, new rite of marriage, new rite of ordination, new rite of extreme unction. The ceremonial development of the Mass touches this change, and we, including himself, will feel perhaps some annoyance. So his new rite will cause annoyance and cause multiple disturbance, and that all, which is that of all the novelties. Okay, so this prepare for changes, prepare for the destruction. Here you go. This novelty is no small thing. So it was not like, oh yeah, the Pope's tinkered with the liturgy, added a little feast here, maybe added a little prayer there. No, it's a new rite, novelty, disturbance, innovation, new order. This novelty is no small thing. That's what Paul VI himself says. This novelty is no small thing, and no Catholic may adhere to novelty, especially in liturgical matters, or in doctrine, of course. By the annoyance of his external forms, he even calls his own rite an annoying rite, especially in its external forms. And this is a serious change. And here it is, the greatest novelty, of course, the removal of the Latin language in defiance of Vatican II, which called for the preserving of the Latin language in the Latin rites and teaching the people how to say it. So when they pretend it's following Vatican II, it's not. It's defying everything. It's making up its own rite. But the new rite of the Mass, again, like how many times does he have to say it's the new rite, it's a novelty, it's an innovation, it's a new order? It is the new rite. Okay, this is again, I'm talking about the distinction between the Roman Missal and the new rite. Regulatory indications. But how will we be able to celebrate the new rite? It's not the Mass, the Roman Rite. Number one, for the Latin text priest who celebrate in Latin in private or even in public, for the cases provided by the legislation, may use until November either the Roman Missal or the new rite. Either the Roman Missal for the Roman Rite or the new rite. He doesn't call it the Roman Missal of 1970. No, he calls it the new rite. So they can either use the Roman Missal or the new rite. Clearly a distinction. If we use the new rite, blah, blah, blah. So here you go. This is what Paul VI said. Calls it new rite, new order, novelty, innovation, unprecedented, annoying, cause disturbance. There you go. So, yeah, it's not the Roman Rite. It's a fabricated liturgy. Now, before we go into here, Kwasniewski's little... actually, maybe I'll do that here. So here is from back in the day, from when? 1989, when I started getting into, I've always been kind of traditional because I believed this is the rites founded by apostolic tradition, Eastern rites, Western rites. The old Fatima Crusader from days of Father Gruner, 1989. So they had a like an article in two issues. Let Catholics Have the Traditional Mass, written by Father Paul Kramer. So in other than this article, there was on page 24, 1989, Traditional Mass Never Suppressed. And that was a papal commission of 9 cardinals determines. So that's from 1989, and probably Cardinal Ratzinger was one of these cardinals. And in it says, so they asked them, did Paul VI authorize the bishops to forbid the celebration of the traditional Mass? The answer was no. Bishops can't forbid the celebration of the ancient Mass because all Paul VI was introduced his own new rite. He didn't abrogate the ancient liturgy. So the commission, I'm going to read you here, the commission unanimously determined that Paul VI never gave the bishops the authority to forbid priests from celebrating the traditional rite of Mass. Regarding the second question, which was, does the priest have the right to celebrate the traditional Mass in public and in private without restrictions, even against the will of the bishop, which is basically what Summorum Pontificum of Pope Benedict XVI basically declared, because it has never been abrogated, and every priest of the Roman Rite can celebrate the liturgy of the Roman Church. Regarding the second, the commission stated that the priest cannot be obliged to celebrate the new rite of Mass. The bishops cannot forbid or place restrictions on the celebration of the traditional rite of Mass, whether in public or in private. So this commission, so after John Paul II published his Motu Proprio Ecclesia Dei Afflicta, appointed a commission of 9 cardinals about the traditional Mass, and some of the cardinals included Cardinal Casaroli, Ganten, and 7 other cardinals of the Roman Curia. And all right. So anyway, so this shows you that has never been suppressed, never been abrogated. All right, I had to pause the recording for a bit, so I hope I remember where I stopped. So as I was saying, it was the article from 1989 or 80, whatever, is Let Catholics Have the Traditional Mass. And Father Paul Kramer, we saw the Commission of Cardinals, which is confirmed by Benedict XVI, that the traditional missal has never been abrogated. So here you go. So anyways, he deals with this article about the abrogation and non-abrogation of Paul VI in his Constitutional Missale Romanum. I'm not sure if I'm going to deal with it here. I'm going to say a couple of lines from it. It says, all the new legislation enacted by Paul VI only derogates the previous legislation which would have prohibited the new rite, but nowhere does any of Paul VI's legislation even presume to abrogate, or in any manner abolish the provisions of quo primum, which, as I said, is the decree of Pius V, which explicitly give and grant, as in quotation marks, give and grant in perpetuity, that for the singing or reading of the Mass in any church whatsoever, this missal, the Tridentine Missal, may be followed absolutely without any scruple of conscience or fear of incurring any penalty, judgment, censure, and may be freely, lawfully used. So anyways, I'm not going to go through the article because basically we have the confirmation of this fact by Pope Benedict XVI that has never been um, abolished or abrogated, which is not possible. I can't abrogate and abolish an apostolic rite and invent a new one and say that's the only rite you're going to use. Then you tell the Pope, it's like, hey, know your role and shut your mouth because you have no such power. You have no such power. Um, all right, so let's go with Dr. Kwasniewski. They have it on Aurorate Celli, the kind of his article. It's actually based upon his lecture at the Roman Forum run by the Remnant newspaper. So beyond Summorum Pontificum, full text. So anyways, there's a link here. If you go to Aurorate, you can find the link to the video. And I'm going to actually play his video. And just the important thing about whether the Pope even has the ability. Is it even licit for the Pope to basically abolish the traditional rite? Let's see if I have his. Oh, here we go. All right, so let's play him. I hope he doesn't kind of. All right, let me see if I can hear him.
Accordingly, the traditionalist movement must, I believe, take much more seriously the question of whether or not the Novus Ordo or any of
Here you go. You can see actually the writing on the left, so you can listen to him and read it here.
the new rites is canonically licit.
Here we go.
Now, I say licit. I'm not talking about validity here, so don't misunderstand me. Does a pope have the authority to do what Paul VI did? That's the question. We are not asking if he can pretend to have the authority, expending 1,000 years of political capital to demand the hierarchy and the faithful to be obedient and receptive to that which undermines their obedience and vitiates their receptivity to tradition. Nor are we asking what Paul VI subjectively thought he was doing or capable of doing, nor of what bishops and the rest of the faithful subjectively thought they were doing or ought to do in response to the imposition of new rites that have more in common with Cranmer and Pistoia than with Cluny and Trent. Rather, we should be asking whether objectively a pope actually has the right, R-I-G-H-T, to substitute new rites for the rites organically developed within the Catholic Church over her entire history. Subjective intentions can be messy and confused, but objectively, the liturgical revolution separated Catholics from their own tradition, from orthodoxy as rite worship, and therefore sundered the lex orandi from the lex credendi, or rather reconfigured their relationship such that the magisterium of the moment became the norm of prayer. In my opinion, if such a rupture can be seen as legitimate and licit, then there are no longer any norms or objective principles of liturgy left. Everything has been reduced to the mere exercise of the papacy in any way it pleases. Rather, this rupture created an internal schism, and that is why it may be necessary to see it as illicit, that is, having no force of law behind it, but being in fact an abuse of power with no objective legal standing. I cannot here lay out the full argument, but I recommend for further consideration, at least as a point of departure, the provocative thesis of Father Gregory Hess, who argues that Trent's condemnation of any pastor whatsoever, per quem cumque ecclesiarum pastorem, changing the church's rites into new rites, applies to the Pope as well. That the constant inclusion of quo primum in every edition of the Missal, in addition to any new bulls, indicates that it was seen as a dogmatically freighted canonization of the content and form of the Roman rite of Mass. That we should take seriously the teaching of Cardinal Juan de Torquemada, who wrote, 15th century, who wrote that if a pope fails to observe, quote, the universal rite of ecclesiastical worship and divides himself with pertinacity from the observances of the universal church, he is able to fall into schism and is neither to be obeyed nor put up with. Non est sustinendus, unquote.
Neither to be obeyed or to be put up with. And that's exactly what should be done. Neither to be obeyed or to be put up with. We're not going to put up with this human excrement, which is masquerading as apostolic power. Anyways, so and he says, Dr. Kwasniewski, yeah, we should take this thing. This first, no pope. It is illicit. So when Jorge says, "Well, you gotta say that uh, the fabricated liturgy of the new rite, the novelty, the innovation of Paul VI, the rite of Paul VI is licit and valid." Well, we can say it's valid. Licit, well, should we be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves and say, well, sure, yeah, well, I guess it's authorized, so it's licit? Well, it could be licit in an introduction of a new rite, but it is not licit in the sense that it can replace the real Roman rite. Well, maybe a pope has the power to introduce a rite, but he has definitely no power in eliminating the ancient liturgy. So if we take it in that sense, we can say, well, sure, it's licit. But in reality, it is illicit because no pope has the right to impose upon the universal church a fabricated liturgy, a novelty, a new liturgical innovation, a new liturgical novelty, which he himself admits, a new rite to replace the original rite. So he says, well, take the arguments of Father Gregory Hess about the Council of Trent's condemnation that any pastor whatsoever basically cannot change the received rites of the Holy Church and replace them with new ones. Nope, that includes if it's any pastor whatsoever, that includes the Pope because he's the pastor of pastors, isn't he? So any and all pastors, and actually this is. Is basically reiterated in the creed, the infallible creed of faith of the Council of Trent, which is basically the same one repeated at the First Vatican Council, and we're going to see what Father Klaus Gamber says about it, and actually Father Paul Kramer in his article about the traditional Mass. He cites Torquemada, which Dr. Kwasniewski talks about. So let us look at what the Council of Trent in its creed, by definition a creed is infallible, states. So it says, I with firm of faith, believe and profess everything that is contained in this creed. And what are some of the things contained in this profession of faith of the Council of Trent, the creed of the Council of Trent, the creed of Pope Pius V of Pius, I can't even see it from my screen. I've got wires and stuff on my screen. But anyways, the creed of the Tridentine Creed, which basically is talking about the Council of Trent, the creed of the Council of Trent. So let's see what the creed says. So the creed, I already said it. I so and so believe, hold, and profess basically everything contained in this creed. And what are the things which are contained in the creed, in the dogma of faith professed by the Council of Trent? The apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions. Here it is in Latin. So apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions and all other observances and constitutions of the same church I firmly admit and embrace. So ecclesiastical traditions and apostolic traditions are not invented by a pope upon the recommendation of liturgical experts. No, they are received, preserved, and passed on. And what else? It says, I also receive and admit. I receive. I don't invent and create and try to suppress. No, I receive and admit the accepted and approved ceremonies, which means the traditional rites. And actually it does here in Latin, it is rites, ritus, traditional rites of the Catholic Church in the solemn administration of the aforesaid sacraments, meaning the sacrament of confirmation, Eucharist, penance, Mass, holy orders, matrimony, all the sacraments. So what is in the creed of the Council of Trent? What does it say? I also receive and admit, accept, the accepted and approved rites and ceremonies, ritus, of the Catholic Church, which exist where and how are they used in the administration of the sacraments. So this is part of the faith, and this true Catholic faith, outside of which no one can be saved, which I now freely profess and to which I firmly adhere. I do so profess and swear to maintain inviolate. Paul VI did not do that, obviously, and with firm constancy with the help of God until the last breath of life. So we see in the Creed of the Council of Trent, and that creed is basically, for all intents and purposes, repeated in, now where are we here? In the decrees, the Creed of the Council of the First Vatican Council. Again. And why do you think it says about maintaining the accepted rites and ceremonies used in administration of the sacrament, apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions? Because at that time, the Protestant innovators were changing and altering and deleting and simplifying the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church used in the administration of the sacraments. That is why. So the faith is to maintain, to preserve, to pass on, not to alter, innovate, and deform. So 6th January 1870, Profession of Faith, First Vatican Council, which is basically identical to that of the Council of Trent. And what is part of the faith professed? Which is the profession of faith which the Holy Roman Church uses. Among the profession of faith is number 2, apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions, and all other observances and constitutions of that same church I most firmly accept and embrace. So that goes for every liturgical rite. So a Greek Melkite must hold on to his liturgy. A Coptic Orthodox Coptic Catholic must hold to the Coptic liturgy in its entirety. An Armenian must hold to the Armenian rites in their entirety. I likewise receive, number 5, and accept the rites of the Catholic Church which have been received, not invented, not created out of nothing, and approved in the solemn administration of all the aforesaid sacraments, which are baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, penance, last anointing, meaning extreme unction, order, meaning holy orders, minor and major, and matrimony. So, again, likewise, all other things which have been transmitted, defined, and declared by the sacred canons and the ecumenical councils, especially the sacred Trent, I accept unhesitantly and profess. This true Catholic faith, outside which none can be saved. So, and we heard Dr. Kwasniewski, if I'm saying his name correctly, refer us to Professor Hess, Father Hess, about the stipulation, the canon of the Council of Trent, that nobody, no pastor whatsoever, whosoever can alter or the received rites of the Catholic Church. That is why it's in the Creed of the Council of Trent. So it is not a matter of his opinion, but it's confirmed by Trent itself through the Creed, and by Vatican I itself through the Creed. So this one, I've shown you this book before previously, the Decrees of the Ecumenical Councils. This volume 2. It's a 2-volume set, has the decrees of all the ecumenical councils from Nicaea up to and including the pastoral, non-dogmatic Vatican II. So I might have to wear my glasses for this one, but it is in session 7. I found an online thing, but this one is a better translation. So you see the Latin on one side, the English on the other side. Anyways, you can see it or not. But, let's see here. Anyways, so that is where this section comes from. And I will wear my glasses for this one because I don't want to be squinting too much. So let's hope these glasses are okay. All right. So it is First Decree on the Sacraments, Session 7, 3 March 1547. Uh-oh, another phone call. Let's continue, ladies and gentlemen. So here we go. So it is the first session. Let's make sure I didn't stop anything. All right, everything's good. So the most holy sacraments, what is this? So it's basically a general agreement to treat the most holy sacraments of the church, by means of which all true justness either begins or, once received, gains strength, or if lost, is restored. So the point of this is to remove errors and rooting out heresies. By adhering to the teaching of the Holy Scriptures, the apostolic traditions, and the common opinion of other councils and of fathers. This council has established and formally decreed the canons here set out. Later, with the help of the Divine Spirit, it will publish others which remain for the completion of the work begun. So, canons on the sacraments in general. So it is number. Let's see here, which I think it's number. Well, in number 2, it says, if anyone says that those same sacraments of the new law, oh no, that's not matter. Let's see here. Let's found it. It is number 13, which I read, as I said previously, read that thing a long time ago, page to page from all the councils. So even before hearing about what Father Hess and Dr. Kwasniewski said, Kwasinski was whatever. So anyways, if anyone says that this received and approved, not the invented and created, the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church in customary use, immemorial custom, customary use in the solemn administration of the sacraments. So all these immemorial rites, customary use, used by the Catholic Church in the administration of the sacraments may, without sin, be neglected or omitted, or omitted at choice by ministers, or can be changed. This is the key. Or can be changed to other new ones, which is what Paul VI attempted to do, but he still called it the new rite. So by or can be changed. Like, if one can even say that these rites, these ancient rites, can be changed to other new ones by any pastor, whatever, let him be anathema. So any pastor whatsoever. So as Father Hesse that includes the Pope, because the Pope is a pastor. He's a pastor of pastors. So nobody has the right to alter the ancient rites of the church and replace them with new ones, creations out of nothing, taking them and deforming the ancient rites and giving us a new rite, a novelty, a great innovation, using the words of Paul VI himself. I'm not making it up, but that's what happened. So no Pope can licitly alter the rites and give us brand new ones and force us to take them. Now, we're going to almost finish up now. Here's back to Monsignor Klaus Gamber. And he will mention a couple of citations from which doesn't refer to them specifically, but as I said in the article by Father Kramer, Catholics have the traditional Mass in the old Fatima Crusader from 1989. When I find something so valuable, I don't throw it away. So in his um, footnotes, footnote number 20, he talks about Cardinal Torquemada, which Dr. Kwasinski talks about. So he says, besides this canon, it should also be noted that it is the teaching of both Suarez and Cardinal Torquemada that um, by the attempt to suppress the traditional liturgy of the Church, one falls into schism. Cardinal Juan de Torquemada, 1388 to 1468, in two of his documents, Commentary in Decretum Gratiani and Summa de Ecclesia, wrote, in this way, the Pope could, without doubt, fall into schism, especially in the true, especially is this true with regard to the divine liturgy, especially for the divine liturgy. As for example, if he did not wish personally to follow the universal customs and rites of the Church. Thus it is that innocent states in the Pope Innocent states that it is necessary to obey a pope in all things, as long as he does not himself go against universal customs of the Church. But should he go against universal customs of the Church, he need not be followed. And he's quoting a pope here. And then Francisco Suarez in 1548 to 1617, called by Pope Paul V, Doctor Eximus et Pius, excellent and pious doctor, usually considered the greatest theologian of the society of Jesus. So what does Francisco Suarez say? A pope falls into schism if he departs himself from the body of the Church by refusing to be in communion with her. And as well, what else? The Pope can become a schismatic in this manner if he does not wish to be in proper communion with the body of the Church, a situation which would arise if he tried to excommunicate the entire Church, or as both Cajetan and Torquemada observe, if he wished to, listen to this, if he wished to change all the ecclesiastical ceremonies founded as they are on apostolic tradition. There you go. No, he can't. So professions of faith, canons of the Council of Trent, and here we'll finish it up before we finish up with Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre for his final commentary. Back to the Roman liturgy of the deform of the Roman liturgy, its problems and background by Monsignor Klaus Gamber, which Ratzinger highly recommended. Here we go. So this is, I'm going to read a bit of it. Let's see. From page 32. My page 32. I don't know if they published it again or not, but from my page 32. Again, I read that a long time ago. Anyways, let's see here. He asked the question, does the Pope have the authority to change a liturgical rite founded on apostolic tradition and developed over many centuries? We have already discussed this. So he says, we have already discussed and shown that in the past, the church hierarchy did not exercise a strong influence in the development of liturgical forms. They were not made up by the hierarchy. They were received by apostolic tradition and grew. It simply sanctioned the rite that grew out of local custom, and even the church practice of officially sanctioning rite emerged relatively late. Only after the printed liturgical books became popular in the West. Not even before printing did the church approve a certain rite. All right, grew up in the cathedrals and the churches, and it was held. I mean, the sad thing is the Emperor Charles Charlemagne forced the abandonment of the Gallican rite and forced his priests to follow the Roman usage instead of following their liturgical heritage, which is a sad, sad loss. In the West, okay, let's see. Again, when they say about the supervision of the liturgy, it does not mean inventing new things. It says here, in the West, the practice began in the Council of Trent, and it is defined in Article 22 of the Constitution of Sacred Liturgy, referring to Canon 1257 of the Codex Juris Canonici. It says, the supervision of the sacred liturgy depends solely on the authority of the Church, which resides in the Apostolic See, and in accord with the law, which with the diocesan bishop. Therefore, no other person, not even blah, blah, blah. The council, now Klaus Gomber continues, the council did not elaborate on what the term supervision of the sacred liturgy means. Sacra liturgiae moderatio means, if we consider the past practices and customs, however, the term cannot mean the type of sweeping revisions of the Mass ritual and the alteration of liturgical texts that we are now experiencing. So rather, we must understand the real meaning in a larger context. Above all, the Council Fathers were intent on preventing every priest from devising the liturgical rite on his own authority, of which, of course, is exactly what is happening today, including the Pachamama scandals and every liturgical innovation possible under the sun. Anyways, I'm going to skip a whole bunch of stuff here, but let's go with the meat of the answer, which is here, page 34. The publication of the Novus Ordo Missae of 1969, however, created a new liturgical rite. And this is not Klaus Gomber just saying it. Paul VI himself. Paul VI himself, we saw himself calling it a new rite, a new order, a novelty, an innovation. So we're not putting words here in the mouth of Paul. We're not being unfair. This is a fact. So, however, he created a new liturgical rite. In other words, the traditional liturgical rite has not simply been revised as the council had intended, rather it has been completely abolished, or attempted to be abolished. And a couple of years later, the traditional liturgical rite has in fact been forbidden. Again, I'm skipping a bunch here. The argument could be made that the Pope's authority to introduce a new liturgical rite, that is, to do so without a decision of the council, can be derived from full and highest power. So that's why if we assume he has that power, we can say, well, maybe the new rite is licit in that sense, but it is definitely not licit as a replacement to the real Roman Rite. However, the term disciplina, which is in no way applies. So about the, it says here, i.e. power over matters, quoting Vatican I, which are that pertain to the discipline and rule of the Church spread all over the world, the power of the Pope. However, the term disciplina in no way applies to the liturgical rite of the Mass, particularly in the fact that the popes have repeatedly observed that the rite is founded in an apostolic tradition. And he has quotes from ancient popes. Pope Innocent I demanded a uniform rite in his letter to the Bishop of Gubo in 402. And then he says basically he says about the rite received, he says, is to be from the Prince of the Apostles, Church of Rome, by Peter, the Prince of the Apostles, is kept even now, ought to be preserved by all. And then quotes another quote that the rites we have come from apostolic tradition, ancient popes. So for this reason alone, the rite cannot fall into the category of discipline and rule of the Church under the power of the Pope. To this, we can add that there is not a single document, including the Codex Juris Canonici, the Code of Canon Law, either the 1917 or the 1983, in which there is a specific statement that the Pope, in his function as the supreme pastor of the Church, has the authority to abolish the traditional liturgical rite. In fact, nowhere is it mentioned that the Pope has the authority to change even a single local liturgical tradition. He doesn't even have that authority. The fact that there is no mention of such authority strengthens our case considerably. There are clearly defined limits to the plena et suprema potestas, the full and highest powers of the Pope. It's not unlimited, as Pope Benedict XVI said. The Pope is not an absolute monarch. His will is not law, but he is subject to tradition, subject to the scriptures, subject to the teaching of the Church. In fact, there are several authors. This is important here, again from Klaus Gamper. In fact, there are several authors who state quite explicitly that it is clearly outside the Pope's scope of authority to abolish the traditional rite or to restrict it. You can't restrict an apostolic rite, a heritage of the Church. Thus, the eminent theologian Suarez, who died in 1617, citing even earlier authors such as Cajetan, who died in 1534, took the position that a pope would be a schismatic, and quoting him now, if he, as is his duty, would not be in full communion with the body of the Church, or, for example, if he were to excommunicate the entire Church, or if he were to change all the liturgical rites of the Church that have been upheld by apostolic tradition, he would be a schismatic. As we have explained, the issue of unlimited papal authority and how it relates to the authority to change the established liturgical rite. If the statement made by Suarez still is not entirely convincing, this argument just may be already established fact that until Paul VI, there has not been a single pope who introduced the type of fundamental changes in the liturgical forms which we are now witnessing. In fact, we must note that even small changes in the liturgy introduced by a pope have never been readily accepted. And he gives an example of St. Gregory the Great and what he did. So here you go. So no, a pope can be a schismatic if he attempts to abolish the rites or to change them and replace them with new fabricated liturgy, which Paul VI did, and which Jorge is attempting to reimpose. So here you go. So basically, making it nice and simple, ignore every word that the Bishop dressed in white says regarding to the traditional liturgy. If you're a priest, say it. If you're a bishop, continue to say it, or even found new orders which will say it. Let's see what Jorge will do. What is he going to do? Suspend you? Well, fine, because now you are obeying God rather than men. You are obeying the Church rather than, one can say, a usurper who is attempting to subvert the Church. This is, even according to Benedict, and has not been altered by Francis, the missal has never been abrogated, because you cannot abrogate the traditional rite. And as such, it is legal and lawful in every way. Unlike the fabricated new rite, novelty, innovation of Paul VI, pretending to be the ordinary form, the fake Roman Rite, which has no basis in history. All right, so that is basically my little spiel, but let's hope for the best, because it is very dangerous for traditional orders who are regularized in full communion with the Church, like the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, the various monasteries and religious orders and Carmelites, and because now they're going to be under the supervision of the Institute of Consecrated Lives or something. And it could be a setup for their total destruction, because they're first immune. They were under Ecclesia Dei, so they were outside the juridical powers of this congregation. So they could not go in, but the Franciscans of the Immaculate were under them, and they were destroyed by Francis through his congregation. So these traditional fraternities have to stand firm and say, no, we will continue to celebrate the ancient liturgy. And if push comes to shove, then go and be in an irregular position, because it's better to obey God rather than men. Let's finish up with Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre and have a couple of inspirational quotes. And actually, he ends his talk, his sermon at Lille, with a plea to the Pope, Paul VI at the time. He says, "Look, actually to the bishop of." To the Pope and to the bishop, he says, look, the bishop here in Lille gave a church to the Muslims. Give us a church and let us do our experiment of tradition, which is a 20 centuries experiment. You have every kind of experiment going on. Just let us do our experiment of tradition. And that is the real reason for this motu proprio of Francis. The experiment of tradition, especially after 2007 with the Summorum Pontificum, stating simply this Mass has never been abrogated. Every priest can say it with or without the bishop's permission, and the faithful have a right to it. End of story. Religious orders can go full traditional again, go back to their own ancient rites, if they so desire. No problem, because it is their right. So it is the true truth, the true liturgical, true Christian, true apostolic attitude. But what happened is, as soon as this happened, there is an explosion of tradition, explosion of vocations into traditional orders, while the modern Novus, Ordo, Paul VI Rite orders are falling and dying off. Explosion of vocations to the priesthood, explosion of vocations to the religious orders, men and women, founding of new orders, establishing of new parishes. The experiment of tradition, was too successful, and therefore Francis wants to appoint guardians of tradition to stop it from spreading, to clamp it down, to extinguish it. He even says in his Motu Proprio, it's like, oh, you've got a parish which only celebrates ancient liturgy. Well, you can look if you want to keep it or not. That's what happened in France. They kicked out the Fraternity of St. Peter. It's been there for a long time. So, all your established traditional parishes, personal parishes, could be eliminated at the will of the bishop with the approval of Francis. And he's saying no more personal parishes. So basically what is going to happen? So you can't have any new churches for the Fraternity of St. Peter, or the Institute of Christ the King, or the Institute of Good Shepherd, or anything like that. No more. You have to go and rent a church for a Mass once on Sundays. Is that how it's going to be? Well, it is this whole thing is meant to stop the growth of true Christianity, of true Catholicism, of true tradition, because the ancient faith, the ancient liturgy, teaches the ancient faith, which is rigid, which is too Christian, which is uncompromising in truth. That is why Jorge wants to stamp it down. And who hates truth more than the devil? And now we know who Jorge serves. All right, let's finish up with the Archbishop here. I'm going to put this so I can make sure I'm not saying where's my little notes. All right, so 2 clips. One starts at minute 30. Let's see, where's minute 30? 30, 31, 30. Okay, good enough. Oh, what happened there?
Voilà, c'est le règne de notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ que nous voulons. Et nous professons notre foi en disant que notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ est Dieu. C'est pourquoi nous voulons aussi la messe de Saint Pie V. Pourquoi? Parce que cette messe est la proclamation de la royauté de notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ.
He says we want the reign of Christ the King, and we want the Mass of Saint Pius V because it manifests the royalty of Christ the King.
La nouvelle messe est une espèce de messe hybride qui n'est
The
plus
new Mass is a hybrid
hiérarchique et
Mass.
démocratique, où
No, not
l'Assemblée prend
hierarchical,
plus de place
democratic.
que le prêtre. Et donc, ce n'est plus une messe véritable qui affirme la royauté de notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ. Car comment notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ est-il devenu roi aussi? Il a affirmé sa royauté par sa croix. Regnavit a lignio Deus. Jésus-Christ a régné par le bois de la croix, car il a vaincu le péché, il a vaincu le démon, il a vaincu la mort par sa croix. Et donc 3 victoires magnifiques de notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ. Ah, on nous dira que c'est du triomphalisme. Eh bien oui, d'accord, nous voulons bien le triomphalisme de notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ.
He says, "Oh yeah, we were going to be accused of being triumphalistic." He says, "Well, yes, we want to declare the triumph of our Lord Jesus Christ."
Et c'est pourquoi nos ancêtres ont construit ces
That's why we
magnifiques
built all these
cathédrales.
churches and
Pourquoi?
cathedrals and so forth. And then actually, he mentioned something about how people say, "Oh, it's because you want Latin." And he talks about his life in Africa and how the different tribes with 6, 7, 8 languages, when he was a big missionary bishop in Africa, were all united in one church, one parish, united in one language. So they would sing the hymns in Latin with vigor and enthusiasm. And even Cardinal Sarah says that basically in his own book. So they were all united. All these tribes were united together as Catholics, one people, worshiping one God in one liturgy. But since the introduction of the vernacular, fighting, he says, go and see them now. Each little tribe is fighting. How come the Mass is in their language, not in our language? How come they've got a priest from this tribe and not from our tribe? That's what's happening even now. I think recently, I can't remember which country in Africa, and then the people of this town refused a bishop appointed by Francis. Why? Because he was not from their tribe. It's from another tribe. They are not going to accept him. So the introduction of the vernacular, especially in these missionary lands, caused division instead of unity, loss of faith instead of holiness. All right, so we'll go to his final thing, which is, maybe there's another 32. Let's see here. What is he saying here?
Personne. Nous ne sommes pas des commandos.
Now, we're not commandos. We don't want to
Nous
harm
voulons
anybody.
du mal à personne. Nous voulons seulement qu'on nous laisse professer notre foi en notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ.
All we want is to profess our faith in Jesus Christ.
Alors on nous chasse de nos églises.
We're kicked out of our
On
churches.
chasse ces pauvres prêtres parce qu'ils disent la messe ancienne qui a été dite.
And all the poor priests being kicked out of their churches for saying the old Mass, which has been said by all the saints.
Dans lesquelles ont été sanctifiés tous nos saints et nos saintes, Sainte Jeanne d'Arc, Saint Curé d'Ars, la petite Thérèse de l'Enfant Jésus, ont été sanctifiés par cette messe. Et voici que des prêtres sont chassés brutalement, cruellement de leur paroisse parce qu'ils disent cette messe qui a sanctifié les saints pendant des siècles.
It's crazy.
C'est absurde.
It's absurd.
Je dirais presque que c'est une histoire de fou.
It must be a
Nous
story of
demandons
madmen.
si nous rêvons.
It looks like we're dreaming.
Pas possible que
These days might be coming now. With if any bishop actually takes seriously the words of Francis, priests who say the ancient Mass and refuse to follow the new will be kicked out of their churches. Congregations will be kicked out of their churches. Religious orders will be kicked out of the diocese for simply holding on to the same liturgical rites and traditions, never abrogated, of the church of all time. Sad.
Messe soit devenue une espèce d'horreur.
How has the Mass been some kind of horror for our bishops and for those who should preserve our faith?
Aux évêques et pour ceux qui devraient conserver notre foi. Eh bien, nous gardons la messe de Saint Pie V. Pourquoi est-ce que la messe de Saint Pie V est la messe de 20 siècles?
It's not the Mass of Pius V, it's the Mass of 20 centuries.
La messe de toujours, elle n'est pas seulement la messe de Saint Pie V. Et elle représente notre foi. Elle est un rempart pour notre foi. Et nous en avons besoin de ce rempart pour notre foi. Alors on nous dira...
And then he talks about Latin, which I mentioned about his African missionary work. All right, we're going to finish up with his final 22nd finale of his speech. Starts minute 49:01. 49. It says, talking about, leave us, let us do the experiment of tradition. The experiment of tradition was too successful. That's why Jorge clamped it down.
Et en définitive, toute la question serait résolue. C'est ce que je demanderais au Saint-Père. D'ailleurs, si le Saint-Père veut bien me recevoir, laissez-nous faire, très Saint-Père, l'expérience de la tradition. Au milieu de toutes les expériences qu'on fait actuellement, eh bien qu'il y ait au moins l'expérience de ce qui a été fait pendant 20 siècles.
That's it. That is it. But the experiment of tradition was just too successful. By their fruits you shall know them. Something is so beautiful, so successful, so uplifting, fills your heart with joy and elevates your mind, takes you out of this mundane world to the heavenly liturgy. Oh, it's too much. Too much success, too many traditional priests, too many young priests becoming rigid and wanting to say the rigid mass and becoming rigid in their faith and morals. Oh, and I guess Jesus was a hippie. No, Jesus Christ was more rigid than the Pharisees. The Pharisees said, well, if you cheat on your wife, commit adultery. Jesus said, if you even look at a woman with lust, you already committed adultery in your heart. So, Jesus was not the kind of man Francis would like. So, that is basically my little commentary on the situation. Basically, ignore what Francis says. Keep the faith, keep the Mass, keep the parishes, and don't compromise. And be good bishops and ignore what Francis says. What is he going to do? Remove 100 bishops from around the world? No, he won't. He'll cave in. He will give up. He'll say, okay, fine, do whatever you want to do. But if all the bishops pretend that Francis or any pope is a divine oracle, whose word is law, above the apostolic tradition, above all of 2,000 years of church history, above the dogmatic decrees of ecumenical councils like Trent and Vatican I, that his word is divine above even St. Paul, who said, hold on to the traditions which you have received, whether by mouth or by epistle, who is above all the ancient fathers who condemned novelty as heretical, then, you're going to face Jesus Christ as your judge. All right, that's it. That's all. I don't think that was... just keep the faith, hold on to it, go to more traditional masses. Give and support only traditional liturgy, traditional priests, traditional parishes, traditional religious orders. Don't give a penny to the Novus Ordo operation. That's it. That's all. See you next time. Bye-bye.